Imagine a world where justice is not decided in courtrooms, where there are no lawyers, no prisons, no long trials. Instead, justice is instant, brutal, and often unimaginably strange. A world where crime against society is also a crime against the gods, where every punishment is a performance, designed not just to hurt the guilty, but to terrify the watching crowd. Across thousands of years of history, in civilizations from Mesopotamia to Rome, from China to the Aztecs, punishments have taken forms so bizarre, so cruel, and so symbolic that they continue to shock us today. This is not the story of law as we know it, but the story of fear, honor, shame, and belief, written into the human body. Tonight we travel deep into the past, across cultures and continents, to uncover the strangest punishments in ancient civilizations. Our story begins in Mesopotamia, the cradle of civilization, nearly 4,000 years ago. The Code of Hammurabi, carved into stone around 1750 BCE, is famous for its line, "An eye for an eye." But the reality was far stranger. A builder whose house collapsed and killed its owner could be executed, while if the collapse killed only the owner's son, then the builder's son would be put to death. Punishment was not about individual guilt, but about balance between families, as though lives could be exchanged like currency. Surgeons who failed their patients could have their hands cut off, ending their craft forever. And even tavern keepers who cheated customers with watered-down beer were sentenced to drowning. Justice in Mesopotamia was not metaphorical. It was as harsh and physical as the stones the laws were carved into. Farther west, along the Nile, ancient Egypt viewed crime through the eyes of gods. Here, blasphemy was the greatest crime, because it was an offense not just against man, but against the divine order. Grave robbers, those who dared steal from the tombs of the dead, faced mutilation, ears, noses, and tongues cut away so that their bodies carried the mark of shame forever. Others were impaled, raised on wooden stakes in the desert, their corpses left for the sun to bleach as a warning to others. Some accounts suggest that men who blasphemed against the gods could be forced to cut out their own tongues, silenced forever so their words could never reach human or divine ears again. In Egypt, punishment was as symbolic as it was painful. The Greeks, with their philosophies of freedom and democracy, were also creative in cruelty. Ostracism allowed citizens to exile anyone they disliked for 10 years with a simple vote, erasing their presence from the city. Spartans punished cowards not with death, but with lifelong humiliation, forcing them to wear disgraceful cloaks, their shame heavier than any chains. Execution was often carried out with ritual poison, the most famous case being Socrates, who was ordered to drink hemlock in front of his students. Yet the darkest legend of all was the brazen bull, a hollow bronze statue in the shape of a bull into which victims were locked before a fire was lit beneath. As the body burned, the screams echoed through tubes, transformed into the roar of an animal. A performance of suffering designed to entertain. Rome, the empire of laws and armies, transformed punishment into spectacle. For soldiers, desertion or cowardice brought the horror of decimation. Units were lined up, and every 10th man was beaten to death by his comrades, their bodies broken to restore discipline. For those guilty of killing their parents, Rome devised one of the strangest penalties of all, the sack of parricide. The condemned were sewn into a leather sack along with a dog, a rooster, a viper, and a monkey, then thrown into the river. The chaos inside was a twisted mirror of their crime, symbolizing the destruction of natural order. For enemies of the state, crucifixion awaited, a slow death under the sun, the body nailed high so that all could see. Rome believed that law was theater and punishment was the stage. Across the world in China, dynasties used punishment not only to enforce law, but to control the soul. Criminals could be tattooed across the face, branded permanently as untrustworthy. Others had their feet amputated, their bodies reshaped as marks of shame. Eunuchs, castrated against their will, became reminders of dishonor. The most feared punishment of all was lynching, the so-called death by 1,000 cuts. Flesh was sliced piece by piece, prolonging death for hours, each cut erasing dignity. But not all punishments were bloody. Some were purely symbolic. Heavy wooden boards called kangyus were locked around the neck, forcing criminals to shuffle through towns unable to eat, drink, or sleep properly, serving as walking lessons for others. In India, punishments drew power from religion and caste. Thieves might be branded with hot iron on the forehead, their crime marked into their skin for life. Adulterers could face the terrifying punishment of being crushed beneath an elephant, a king's justice delivered by the animal's unstoppable weight. Yet some punishments focused on humiliation rather than death. Criminals covered in soot, stripped naked, paraded through the village streets, shaming not just themselves, but their entire families. Justice in India was often a spectacle that punished honor as much as flesh. Traveling to the Americas, the Aztecs bound law and punishment to their gods. Public drunkenness, if repeated, carried the penalty of death, for alcohol was seen as a dangerous path to chaos. Thieves might be enslaved or sacrificed, their lives offered to the sun god as payment for their crime. The most shocking of all punishments blurred the line between punishment and ritual. A criminal could be chosen to impersonate a god for a year, treated as royalty, dressed in jewels, given feasts and women. And then, at the year's end, he would be marched to the temple, laid on a stone, and sacrificed. The punishment was not only death, but becoming divine for a moment before destruction. In medieval Europe, punishment became theater for the masses. Thieves might be locked into the pillory, their heads and hands trapped while crowds hurled rotten food and stones. Drunks wore barrels as cloaks, mocked in the streets. Wives accused of gossip might be forced into iron bridles, spiked masks that silenced their tongues. Accusations of witchcraft brought burning at the stake, flames licking upward as neighbors watched. Others faced trial by ordeal, plunging their hands into boiling water, walking across fire, or being thrown into rivers. Survival meant innocence. Suffering meant guilt. In a world without science, punishment was not only law, but divine judgment. Across Africa, punishments varied widely, but many carried the same sense of spectacle. In some regions, adulterers were stripped naked, paraded before their community while being spat upon. In Ethiopia, thieves might lose a hand, their punishment as much about honor as about preventing repeat crimes. Some tribes used poison ordeals, forcing suspects to drink toxic brews. If the gods spared them, they were innocent. If not, their death was considered proof of guilt. Justice was entwined with fate, belief, and ritual. In Persia, punishment reached horrifying extremes. Thieves could lose hands, while traders faced scaphism, trapped between boats, force-fed milk and honey, their bodies smeared so that insects swarmed and ate them alive. It was a death not just of the body, but of dignity. Adulterers could be stoned, each rock representing the collective anger of the community. These punishments were messages carved into human flesh, warnings for all who saw. In Japan, honor itself was punishment. Samurai who failed their duty were expected to commit seppuku, ritual suicide by cutting open their stomachs. This gruesome act was not considered punishment, but redemption, a way to erase shame with blood. Criminals might be crucified in Japanese fashion, tied to crosses and speared with lances, left for birds to feed upon. Others were paraded with wooden signs describing their crimes, so that shame lived on in public memory long after pain had ended. Across every continent, every empire, punishment was more than law. It was a reflection of what each society feared most: disorder, dishonor, blasphemy, betrayal. Punishments were theater, symbols, warnings, and sacrifices. They shaped not just the lives of the guilty, but the beliefs of the innocent. And while today we recoil at their brutality, we cannot escape the truth that, for our ancestors, justice was not about fairness. It was about fear. It was about power. It was about control. And as we walk through the ruins of their civilizations, reading the stones, the tablets, and the chronicles that remain, we are reminded that the line between law and cruelty has always been thin. The strangest punishments of ancient civilizations reveal not just their crimes, but their humanity.